This piece of the Gospel of John, chapter 17, is a recall of what we call the last prayer of Jesus at the Last Supper, the priestly prayer. We'll talk about that in a second. He's talking directly to his Father. But the sequence of today's readings is interesting because chronologically, that happened first, that reading, on the Last Supper. So he's talking to God the Father. When you hear Holy Father, you probably think of Leo, but he's not talking about Leo. He's talking about the Holy Father in heaven. And he's speaking to his Father. And it's funny because John recorded this, and they're eavesdropping on his prayer to the Father. So it's no secret. He's praying out loud to his Father about his friends, about himself and his own relationship with God, and about you and me. Those who will come to believe through their word. And that's us. We came to believe in Jesus through the Gospels, the evangelists. Okay, so let's go back. So that happened first. Then the Acts of the Apostles, we have Stephen. Stephen is the first martyr. He's a young man, he's Greek, and he was made a deacon in the church by the apostles. And a deacon is, today, there are two kinds of deacons: transitional, men who will become priests, are deacon for a while. I was a deacon for a while. And then permanent deacons, men of the community who decide to be leaders in the community. And a deacon's job is preach the word and give out the Eucharist. So they're meant to be people who preach, read the Gospels, and bring the Eucharist from the altar to the community or to the sick. That's the role of the deacon. So they're talking about Stephen, who's following the apostles and has this great relationship with Jesus through the preaching of the apostles. Just like you and I know about Jesus through the apostles, so did Stephen. And this is the first century, only probably a few years after Jesus ascended. Okay, so that's the background. Then we jump forward to the book of Revelation. It's Last Supper. As a result of the Last Supper and Jesus' life, Stephen's martyrdom. As a result of the martyrdom and eventually the death of John the evangelist, we have the third reading, which is the book of evangelization, the book of Revelation, the book of really going out and teaching. And sometimes it's called the Apocalypse, the book of the Apocalypse, because the word means uncovering. So in that book, there are a lot of mysterious kind of unknowns, but John, the evangelist who wrote it, is making a point. Not everybody will understand what I'm reading, what I'm writing about, but you will understand it because you already have God's faith in you. He believes. So when we read the scriptures, we don't just open them up and read them and say, okay, here they are, let's talk about them. I think the context is so important. And today we have the context of all three of them. But the key of today's scriptures is that Last Supper reading. God the Father is being addressed by Jesus, your brother and mine, about us. Jesus is talking about us to God his Father. And us includes the apostles who were at the Last Supper. Now we presume by this point, Judas had already went into the darkness and left. So we're talking about whoever was at the Last Supper, men, women, the apostles we know were there, and you and me. So Jesus is talking about us, and when we have that in mind, maybe the words take on a different meaning, a different impression. He's talking about him, Jesus, being in the Father and Jesus being one from the beginning of creation, from all times. We were one. I wasn't there, none of us were there. But he's saying, from the beginning of the thought of creation in the mind of God, Jesus was one with the Father. And that's what makes up the Trinity, because the third person is the Spirit. Talk about the Spirit another time. So Jesus is talking about uniting these people who are at his table with the Father according to the Father's plan before creation. Because he says, I was with you then. We were one. Two of us were one. And he's bringing the Last Supper table and you and me into that same mix. I don't know all your names, but think of your own name. Think of, in your mind, say your name to yourself, or you say it out loud if you want, and realize Jesus. Okay, I'll choose to my right. Brother's right here. So I'm going to say Brother Chuck, and I'm Louie, and Jerry taking pictures. All of us. Jesus is talking about us, and he's saying to his father, Dad, I want you to bring Chuck into your life as you are in my life, and I want you to make sure that Chuck and this whole community is working with you and in you. So God the Father, whatever you do to me, this is Jesus talking, I want you to do that for Chuck and the entire community of St. Anthony's and anybody who hears my voice. Because my goal is to have all of them, us, one. It's not an if, when we finally believe that, you realize how the world will be transformed? That every one of us is assured that we are in Jesus and Jesus is in us. So when we go out, when we dance, when we eat, when we party, when we cry, Jesus is with us. Based on that prayer and based on his ministry of promising always to be one with us. And the comparison he makes is perfect. He's talking to his Father in heaven. I'm going to call it his Abba, his daddy. He's talking to his Father in heaven and saying, Dad, I want you to remind me that I'm one with you and you're one with me. And I want these guys and ladies to be one in us and you in them. Not only those at the table, but those who will come to believe because of them. You hear the outreach that Jesus is performing? You hear the fullness of the message? And for that reason, because he believed it, Stephen prayed to Jesus. Now, Stephen was a deacon, but he was also a Jew, a Hellenistic Jew, a Greek. And he was thrown out of the temple because he kept preaching about Jesus, telling people that Jesus, remember Jesus died on the cross? He rose, he's alive. And those in the temple said, stop talking that way. He says, I can't stop talking that way because Jesus is with me. He's encouraging me to talk that way. Because I see, now this is a really tough one. I see, this is Stephen, as they drag him out of the city and they're going to stone him to death. He says something that is so offensive to the Jews. I see God. I see the glory of God. And I see Jesus at his right side. And what do? Those who were going to stone him? They covered their ears because they thought he was blaspheming. Because nobody can see God. But in his passion and in his holiness, Stephen has a vision. He's being beaten, but he looks up to heaven and he says, I look up to heaven and I see the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right side. And he says, behold, heavens are open. Put ourselves in the position of Stephen. Because you and I have the same gift and same ability. Now that's a vision. And he had that personally with God. But you and I have the invitation, the same invitation to see Jesus. And Jesus himself has said it. You give me a glass, you give a poor person a glass of water, you're giving it to me. You feed the hungry, you're feeding me. You clothe those who need clothing, you're clothing me. You visit those who are in prison or homeless, you're visiting and taking care of me. And he didn't say, you got to be a king or a queen or a president or an emperor. No. The poorest, the outskirts of society. You take care of one of them and you're taking care of me. Now go back. At the Last Supper, what did he pray? That he stays in us, that the Father stays in us, and where we go, Jesus is with us. So through the eyes and the lens of our faith, we're being invited, one, to bring Jesus more and more into the world. Through our actions. Say those names again. Say all your individual names. Through those people, each of us, Louie and Brother and Jerry and the rest. And as you bring Jesus to others, we got to respect the fact that it's Jesus in us. And Jesus is available to us. Not in your thoughts, not in your mind, not in your feet, in our whole selves. He's always with us. This is the whole promise of Jesus, that he can be glorified and go to the Father wherever heaven is. But while that happens, he remains in us, and God the Father remains in us. In the middle of the sanctuary, oh, it's not there, sorry. So, something fell. There is an object called reliquary, and next week for the Feast of St. Anthony, it'll be processed. A reliquary is a piece of the saint or a piece of his garment, okay? You and I are reliquaries of Jesus Christ. You know, at Holy Hour, when they put the monstrance on the altar, which is a gold radiating object, and they put the host in there, I say they, the priest, the deacon, puts the host in there, and we hold it up, and we sing Tantum Ergo, we sing Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. That's a reliquary, a monstrance. You are more important than the monstrance because you have Jesus in you as you go out there. The real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, absolutely important. But when you're outside the church, you don't take that with you. You take it with you. You take the presence of Jesus with you. Excuse me. We take the presence of Jesus with us. So how we deal with one another, how we respond to one another, how we cooperate with one another, how we work and speak justice about one another and about the stranger, we're doing that about Jesus. That's his words, not mine. So what does Jesus say? I pray not only for them, but for those who will believe in me through their word, so as Father, you are in me and I in you, and they may also be in us. And that's where you are, in the presence of Jesus. When you take him home, remember that. No, it's on the altar. You distracted? That's a lot to take in, but it is a mystery and it is our faith. So let's stand as we proclaim what we believe.